Welcome everyone to Hidden SQuiDZ Gaming. Today it's going to be all about John Seed. Let's talk about John Seed's past before we get into who he is now. John is the lawyer for the family, and he is how they acquired so much farmland throughout the intro of the game. He grew up in a small fortune from his adoptive family from down in Georgia. However, the family he grew up with was extremely religious and would beat John until he confessed his sins. Thus he learned to say yes. After the night he was beaten so badly, this is all he could say anymore. This money and manipulative and lawyer abilities allowed him to grow the cult within legal means until it was time for more drastic measures. John's role at Eden's Gate is the confessor and the Baptist. In other words, the converter to the side of light. When you finally admit your sins, he will write it on your chest or anywhere to expose the sin inside of you. He is the youngest brother of the three. Like all characters, John is a character representing suppressed struggles. You can feel the tension in him when Joseph is present and when he isn't. Joseph even says himself, John was not always good, even though you get this information after you kill John. Joseph had to stop John from essentially drowning you, and I take this from the first abduction scene. The reason why I do this is the first time we get 1v1 interaction with John. And it's also alluded to throughout a lot of this that John is subject to the control of wrath. There are many hints throughout the game that suggest this, but a big one is saying that the cleansing did not work the first time. This is a glaring flaw because John is the Baptist and he essentially mocks the ability of the Father to cleanse the deputy. Joseph has to remind John that the deputy is not beyond salvation and that drowning him would ruin the plan.
No, Joseph.
You have to love them, John. Do not let your sin prevent that.
The cloudy vision of John and his need for guidance and correction from Joseph really shows how flawed John is as a person. He's not flawed in the sense of bad writing, but as a human being who went through some tough situations in life and how those moments have twisted his perception. This also shows that John thinks about Joseph along with their connection to one another.
Despite what you have done, you are not beyond salvation. You're not here by accident or by chance. You are here by the grace of God. You've been given a gift. Now it remains to be seen whether you choose to embrace it.
Joseph holds John in a way that makes you feel the struggle of John's seed and Joseph's sympathy towards it. Also in the eulogy, Joseph used to say that John was filled with love, caring, and all that stuff, and easily taken advantage of. So we have an idea that John used to be something and then he was manipulated into the supposed monster he is today.
Yes, Joseph.
He whistles before his session with the deputy in Hudson as if it was something casual and entertaining. In the torture scenes, you never knew what John was going to do or was capable of at this point. John wanted you to atone for your sins. However, this was accompanied by methods of pain, and these occasionally led to death. I call them torture scenes, though from John's point of view, these were confessions.
Before we begin,
this is shown by wheeling Hudson out of the room saying confessions should be done in private.
Hudson goes back to her room. Confessions?
And she screams as she leaves. As stated, John believes that atonement can only be reached through pain. This idea is further supported by the cultists in the truck during the deputy's first abduction.
You'll scream out your sin, then you'll wear it on your flesh before John peels it off you. It's a beautiful thing.
John himself admits that Joseph had to show how selfish he was being, that giving takes true courage. He tries to give you the gift of atonement by these tattoos and torture sessions.
Always receiving, always taking.
However, most of the time they are empty confessions. They are often empty confessions since he is torturing someone or threatening someone close to them.
It takes courage. Courage to own your sin. To etch it onto your flesh and carry its burden. And when you have endured, when you have truly begun to atone, to cut it out like a cancer and display it for all to see. I'm going to teach you courage. Teach you how to say yes. So you can confront your weaknesses, confront your sins. You will swim.
We're gonna go to the ending fight
There
for an
it is.
example of this. This can be seen at the church where Nick Rye refuses to confess until John whispers something in his ear. Suddenly and magically, Nick wants to confess, and this is when John decides to show how greedy Nick was being and cuts his chest skin off. We are left to think that John was threatening his family, and this is what made Nick confess. In John's mind, his sin is made public and he has atoned, even though it was to stop the threats from John. Obviously, you can see the flaw in this, in that this isn't true confessions. These are people just screaming whatever makes John happy, whatever satisfies the requirement for him.
Yes, I will atone.
It's the power of yes. The power to take away your sins.
Jumping back in time, John proceeds to give us some of his history from his perspective on how something broke free inside that night. He was beaten to the point where he could only say yes. This gives you a feeling he was abused so hard that his sanity and hope for a normal life had been broken, shattered, and the only way out was to confess his sins via excruciating pain. Even if this meant he had to make up things to say yes to so they would stop beating him.
And when I didn't think I could take any more.
This is obviously transmitted to others as his ideal way of confession and atonement, as you can see throughout the entire playthrough of the game. Everyone says that confession is accompanied with pain, and without pain, they are not a true confession. This comes from John, and this is the twisted sense of the cult.
Laugh. All I could say was yes. I'm going to teach you
To further see into his ideology, we're going to look at something here.
Teach you how to say yes. So you can confront your weaknesses, confront your sins. You will swim across an ocean of pain and emerge free.
You can see this as he freezes when he says across an ocean of pain, and he takes a little pause to say free. Sounds like there's so much anger and resentment left. Is this significant? It almost signifies that he causes pain to not be alone or to suppress his messed up life, and he has to recite it to himself. This is how you are truly free. John wants to be free from his past and his thoughts about himself, but he simply can't do it. I think this is powerful dialogue for John, since it gives you a feeling that he's not always evil, and the beatings and being picked on as a child has led him here. It just sounds so sad when he says it. He gets so mad, and then he finally says free, because that's the one thing he's not from himself.
So who wants to go first?
It is also worth taking notes the differences between his demeanor of saying yes and refusing to volunteer yourself during the abduction scene. He gets so mad and flips the table over just because he wants someone to say yes.
Someone's got to choose. For fuck's sake, we'll start with you.
His thoughts and actions drive fear and apprehension because of his ability to be unpredictable. I know some people don't like that about John, but John, he's only unpredictable because he's struggling on the inside of the confession and the wrath side of him. I truly thought he was going to start filleting the deputy like an animal. However, you were given a chance to escape before the impending carvings began. During this scene, I had a real sense of apprehension and uncomfortableness as he'd get really close to you and you could not escape his wrath. John truly represents both sides of the cult, the fake loving side and the annihilation and murder side. Speaking about the loving and peace side of the cult, his intro video of Yes is just amazing in my opinion. In the video you know the danger and the facade that exists, but at the same time you can feel conformity and possible peace in an irrational cult. As the introduction to an area, I think they did a great job in creating it, and it really spills out who John was going to be as a character.
You don't have to do anything. We'll come for you. Welcome Eden's Gate.
The dialogue and the
Hold
banter on the
still.
radio really show that John
It's supposed to say
tried
wrath,
or
not
did understand you and
rat.
left you to make your heirs because of your wrath. And he
Sin.
says that he intimately knows your sin because we are led to believe that it is wrath and not sloth, which is written across his chest. I have a hard time believing that sloth is John Seed's sin. He went to law school, he required all of these things, he does all the confessions. John has done so much that I can't see sloth being his primary sin. If you think it is, please leave me an excerpt below explaining maybe what I missed, but I would really see John more as wrath. His unpredictableness and anger really drives him there. John's situation is being a prisoner to his past and never be able to get past the harsh feelings for himself or society. His final fight scene is fun, but a tad unforgiving and odd in the beginning. I am not here to talk about the whole death sequence of John, but it is important since it builds onto the final thoughts of the region. My first complaint is your character just willingly opens the door to the church to eat a butt of a gun to the face. Seemed a little off since you knew this was going to be not a friendly area. The other complaint is that he did not notice the Bible for the next 2 or 3 minutes when Jerome switched them. Here are my thoughts. I think John was so absorbed in finally getting the leader to confess their sins, his wrath literally blinded his visions. All he could see was you and the anticipation of your confession, so he could staple it to the church doorway behind
Those willing
him.
to atone for their sins.
To those willing to atone for their sins.
Will you, Nick Rye, place your hand upon?
These are my thoughts, and they are not the only way to think about it. It could be bad writing, up to the imagination, or maybe John saw it but truly did not care about the confession side. That would be unlikely. However, we have seen him deviate from the Baptist side of him before. Sometimes blood and violence is what John needed but could not admit. We saw this when he tried to drown the deputy in the water, saying the cleansing did not work. It's almost as wrath always took the seat over the cleansing or controlled factor.
It's just one word.
And here at the end, and I'm sorry for the static, the game's voicemails make a natural static, so I'm going to try to keep it low enough where you can hear or at least read the text, but not hear the constant static of the voicemail.
Is it, John? Cast away your past. You need to open up your heart. You need to see that there is more love all around you. All the pain and suffering you spread will not help us in the long run. These actions will only feed the sin inside you. It will grow stronger. It will convince you to do wicked things. Those you scar too deeply, they will heal. They will become carriers of your sin. They will spread that sin to others. I've seen your death in a vision. You're destined to be slayed by your own sin. It will come back around in a new form. It's only a matter of when. I've seen you die young. I've seen you die old. The difference between the two outcomes is how much love you let into your heart. I pray that you hear these words before it's too late. I want to see you become an old man in the paradise we prepared for. I love you, brother. I love you.